Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us today on the live session. I know that most of you already got the certification, others are still finishing the course, but I believe we have many questions for Paul today. So, our session today will be 45 minutes presentation from our host, Paul Sidwire, followed by Q&A session handled by my colleague from ICTTF, Ella O'Neill. I will ask all of you at the end of the post presentation for the Q&As if you want to turn on your camera and ask your questions directly to him would be brilliant, or otherwise just send us on the chat. So, Paul, thank you so much for being here today. The floor is yours.
Thanks, Natalia, and welcome everybody. It's great to be here on yet another cybersecurity bootcamp for women. So it's brilliant, and we're still buzzing after the webinar yesterday celebrating International Women's Day. So hopefully you all got a chance to attend that webinar, or indeed have a look at the recording up on ICTTF.org. So guys, I've got quite a bit of material I want to go through today with you before we get to the Q&A session. And please, as Natalia says, make the Q&A session is interactive, because this is your chance to talk, to ask questions, and no holds barred, anything around cybersecurity, risk management, privacy, your career, any of those things I'm happy to try and help you with and try and guide you with in those respects. So look, I'm going to plow on at a little bit of pace. Hopefully you know who I am. I'm Paul Dwyer, the president of ICTTF, and I've had a career of about 30 years in the world of cybersecurity and risk management around the world, working with law enforcement, working with military, working with global organizations, and indeed small companies as well, protecting them from cyber threat actors of all different kinds. And that's why it's an immense pleasure and pride to be able to head up an organization like the ICTTF and to be able to share that knowledge with as many people who are like-minded and want to protect the world. But we're going to talk a little bit more about that and what's going on in the world in a few moments. So let me start. I formatted today's briefing a little bit different from the previous briefings we've done for the Cybersecurity Bootcamp for Women. And I've broken it down into some sections which I feel might be just bite-sized pieces and might help you to think or maybe take some notes that you want to ask questions when we get to the Q&A piece. So first, just remind us a little bit about the cyber threat landscape itself. Bear with me, because this machine is not behaving with Zoom today. So there we go. We essentially, as I put it, we live in two worlds. We live in the real physical world, and we have no choice but to live and exist in the cyber world. And this reality is becoming more obvious to us every day when we look at what's going on in the world from a politics point of view, geopolitics, cyber threat actors, the activity that's going on. And that interconnection between the cyber world and the real physical world, and how it's manifesting itself from kinetic threats to cyber threats, is becoming all too real. And I think we're going to see a lot more of that in the coming time. But the example I tend to use, and I reference within some of the course material, is if you think of how a bad actor, a criminal, may operate in the real world and they want to steal something for you. Well, they have to get physical access to that asset, what they want to steal for you. So they might, for example, want to steal your laptop. So they need to get physical access to that laptop. They take it, they run away with your laptop, you notice the laptop is gone, you raise the alarm, and maybe there's been a witness, maybe there's CCTV, maybe law enforcement is contacted, there's an investigation. As I say, maybe there's witnesses and evidence of it being taken, therefore it's an investigation, and maybe the bad guy has been apprehended and they face what we call attribution. They face court, they face justice. And indeed, you may have transferred the risk by having that laptop insured. And what's the laptop worth? 500 euros, 600 euros, whatever it happens to be. But what's on the laptop is far more valuable: data. And data is the new cash. And the reality is that if the bad actor, the cyber criminal, wants to steal your data, which is far more valuable, from anywhere in the world, they don't need physical access. And when they do steal your data, if they steal your data, you won't even know they've taken it, because you still have access to the asset. You still have the data in front of you. You're working away, but they have taken a copy of it and they're now chopping it up. They're splicing it, they're dicing it, they're selling it on marketplaces, and they're making money out of it in that way. So the chances of them facing facing attribution are very low, and the chances of you maybe even having transferred that risk to insurance company or whatever are also quite low as well. So you can see there's quite a few differences, and it's probably one of the main catalysts why we see this underground economy of cybercrime overtaking that of illicit narcotics. And it's a $6 trillion economy, and it's proliferating. We're really just on page one of the cybercrime book on how we're seeing all of this develop. So it would be nice if we could just sort of pigeonhole all of these threat actors. We can't really, but what we can do is we can think of them like almost a Venn diagram. And what I want you to understand from this is not all of the cyber threat actor groups. These are the main cyber threat actor groups. And there's a couple of things I want you to realize in this infographic. First thing is they all have different objectives, different motivations. So for example, cyber criminals, they want to make money. The business people, they want to make money. You might have nation states that carry out their activity for geopolitical reasons. You may have hacktivists, that's online hackers that are maybe reacting or protesting against something, and they'll use hacking capabilities to do that. So we see a lot of that activity at the moment. For example, with groups like Anonymous attacking Russia and the Russian infrastructure and so on. So it's not always cut and dry that hacktivists are bad, because depending on their motivations and what their ideology is, you may agree with them. And then, of course, we've got the cyber terrorists, we've got terrorist-related groups who may want to groom online, may want to control critical national infrastructure, may want to spread terror, and so on. And then you've got thrill seekers. That are generally the ones that we often see making the headlines in media, because it's with the headline when you see, oh, a 13-year-old has just hacked into $1 billion company. And they tend to be motivated by doing it for the fun, doing it for the kudos. And finally, there's a group that we often reference, which are cyber insiders. And they sometimes are just the disgruntled. They are maybe somebody who's missed out on a job opportunity or feels that they've been hard done by, and their motivation is to cause the company or the organization harm. But we often have another group of insiders, which are those that maybe are themselves victims of cybercrime. They may be victims of romance scams or sextortion, and they may be being blackmailed into doing something from within your organization. And the painful reality is that people inside the camp, inside your organization, are far more dangerous and you're far more vulnerable to them than you are to those that are outside an organization. So when we look at these different threat actor groups, and again, remember, this isn't all of them. These are the main ones. There's almost an overlap between all of these, because they all work together. They work within that ecosystem of cyber criminality and of what I often refer to as cyber evil. So I want you to think of your adversary as someone in the middle of that, an entity, a group in the middle of all that. So when you're fighting against stopping a criminal stealing your data because they want to monetize it and use it for a scam, you're stopping terrorism, you're stopping groups like pedophiles, you're stopping rogue nation states. You're fighting against all of this because they're all interconnected in that piece. So, one second, sorry, the issue here with Grant, just a little technical issue, sorry. There we go on. So we talked about the marketplace's insatiable demand for the material that they're trying to steal. And that is because, just like fruit in a market, in a stall, the fresher it is, the more expensive it is, and it's supply and demand. So if we think again of data, say, for example, we reference something like FULZ data, F-U-L-L-Z. FULZ data often refers to that term where full account data, so it might be name, address, billing address, date of birth, credit limits, that kind of more full, comprehensive kind of a record that a cyber criminal may want access to. And that's far more valuable if the victim, if the target entity of that data doesn't even know it's been stolen, because the bad guys can probably get away with a lot more things using that data, so it's far more valuable to them. Once it's been notified and account numbers are changed and passwords are changed and so on, it's got less value. So it's almost like, fruit going off, and it's got less value as it goes on. And that's why there is always this insatiable demand. As we change passwords, we change account numbers, we change billing address, we change all of those kind of pertinent details that can be used to carry out a scam. They want the freshest of information and the freshest of details. So now I'm going to move on. I said we're going to swap it into a couple of few topics. So that was just to get us tuned in to the cyber risk landscape. Now I'm going to focus in on a little bit about what we call geopolitics. And geopolitics is extremely important when it comes to the world of cybersecurity, risk management, and so on, because it's that reality of the real world and the physical world and that cyber world being interconnected together. And what happens in the real physical world has an instant impact on the cyber world from a threat perspective. So let's learn a little bit more about that. So the elephant in the room, guys, normally at this point, I start talking about COVID and I start talking about the impact of COVID on people working from home and those risk aspects. But really what I want to talk today is about Ukraine and the activity from Russia and what that means from a geopolitical point of view. So the impact and reality of that is that what we're talking about here is the fifth domain. This is a term that was coined by The Economist magazine 10, 15 years ago, where they refer to the fact that we now carry out warfare on 5 different domains: land, sea, air, space, and now cyberspace. So this is a real theater of war. There's a lot of activity going on. I just roll my eyes when I hear people talking about the fact that cyber warfare isn't real and it doesn't happen and so on, because for over a decade, I've been dealing with the impacts of cyber warfare around the world, and I have a career of 3 decades. But I've seen the increase in that activity, and we'll look at some of those examples of what's going on as well. So it's pedantics to say that it's not cyber warfare, and that's illustrated when you see things like the first summit meeting between Putin and Biden, and they actually sat down the terms of cyber warfare. Essentially, they sat down. They said, "Hey, you don't hack this and we won't hack that," because of the impact that can be carried out. If you can, attack our water, our electricity, our utilities, and switch them off, you can control a country. So it's really about setting ground rules of warfare. And that's what's been happening all along and for many years, but we're really seeing it come to light. Now, cyber warfare actors, they tend to use what we call APTs, advanced persistent threats. And APTs are exactly what that sounds like: advanced, and they're persistent threats. They're not always just a piece of malware. They're an entity, a human being or a group of human beings that want to carry out an attack on you for some reason. And it's not just going to be based on effort versus reward from the point of view of what a criminal would do. So a criminal would invest a certain amount of money to break into a bank or steal a certain amount of data because they're going to get an ROI, return on their investment of carrying out that, and they're in business to make money. But those nation states and rogue nation states that use these kind of APTs are using what we call zero-day vulnerabilities. And zero-day vulnerabilities are actually a very expensive thing, generally probably worth about $150,000, $250,000 for a zero-day vulnerability. And what a zero-day vulnerability is, it's when they've identified a vulnerability or a weakness in some code, in an application or an operating system, whatever it happens to be, but it is unknown to the manufacturer, unknown to the developer, and therefore it can be exploited without anybody knowing. Now, this, as you can imagine, is a very powerful thing to have. And so criminals will pay a lot of money for that kind of access, because it means there's nothing to prevent them using it, to exploiting it, and to taking advantage of it. But what we see with nation state and APT kind of attacks, and they're the kind of attacks that we see coming in maybe from China, Unit 61398 of the People's Liberation Army, will often use a lot of APTs, and so will Russian cyber threat actors that are nation state or nation condoned from that perspective. So it's interesting though, these are much more surgical, much more pointed, and they're not just about making money, they're about carrying out whatever their gain is. And these can be pointed at essentially the backbone of civilization. And for all of us, really, we're talking about critical national infrastructure. We're talking about electricity, water, gas. And the systems that control those, SCADA-based systems, industrial control-based systems, have been built to be reliable and robust, but not necessarily secure. So often when we talk about these systems, we talk about the fact that they are, cybersecurity is about the premise of CIA, confidentiality, integrity, and availability, the CIA triad. And that's generally how you look at security when you're securing data within an organization. But when it comes to industrial control systems, it's about availability, integrity, and confidentiality in the reverse order. So they were designed to be available, designed, that their integrity was there, and that the systems and anything that's monitoring up there is true and confidential, that they couldn't be hacked into. And because a lot of these systems are now not air gapped, as in they're now connected to the internet for monitoring and for those kind of purposes, the fact is that they're extremely vulnerable. And this is something that these actors have, these bad actors have taken advantage of. Now, I referenced groups like APT-10 and the People's Liberation Army, Unit 61398 of the People's Liberation Army, that they are generally the reference groups for people when we talk about warfare, because these are military units who their job and in full uniform is to attack companies and organizations around the world, and not just steal data. It's about stealing intellectual property. Why spend billions in years doing research on medical devices or technology if you can simply steal it, use it, and increase your economy? And it's an economic advantage to doing that. So this is the world that we live in. Do you call that warfare? Do you call that crime? It's a nation state. So you can see where these blurred lines are, guys, as we progress in this area. And that connection has been seen very clearly, not just in the last few days and weeks and months, but over the last few years. When the posturing of what would go on, for example, when the Crimea was annexed and Putin, for example, would carry out some of his nefarious activity, and then you would have a reaction maybe from the United States of America, and as a show of strength, as a shot across the bow, Putin's army of cyber individuals who are not all military based. Some of them are the gangster mafia, gangster capitalism type entities that stay protected within Russia by him, so that when he needs them, he can use them to carry out these kind of activities. And they would fire a shot across the bow that might take down JP Morgan, just as a show of strength. And that's a warning. That's a warning from Putin to the West to say, hey, you keep saying this, and these are the kind of things that are going to happen. And it's all that posturing, that pushing, that jostling that goes on. And we see that going on every day in the world of cyber. So let's look at some of the techniques, some of the tactics that a nation like Russia has been using essentially since World War II. They'll use information warfare, they'll use cyber espionage, and they'll use cyber warfare. So to understand the differences between these things, information warfare is about causing confusion. It's about controlling the narrative, controlling the messaging about what's going on, and causing confusion, whether it's about vaccines, whether it's about the 2016 elections in the United States. It's about spreading these conspiracy theories, all those kind of things, using trolls, using what they call a GRU unit, that they have an organization with hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of online trolls that set up fake accounts, hundreds of thousands of fake accounts on social media all around the world to carry out this kind of narrative and pick on a particular politician or particular cause and undermine them. And it's often referred to as what they're essentially trying to do is, I think they call compromise, where they're trying to compromise people as well, maybe get some blackmail on them as well. You've got cyber espionage, where the compromise piece fits in, and we've seen this from the area of things like I referenced even when we were at the EU Cyber Summit, and I was talking with Snowden, and we talked about Khashoggi, the journalist, had just been brutally murdered, and we outlined the tools that were used by Saudi Arabia to carry out espionage and to surveil a journalist, the press, the free press, and ultimately led to the brutal murder of a journalist. So these are the kind of tools that these kind of nations use. And when we see even this interconnection between someone like Putin, and, for example, in the Syrian Electronic Army, the Syrian Electronic Army is basically a bunch of teenagers, but those bunch of teenagers are supported by Russia and the advanced hacking capabilities of those teams within Russia. So they were able to carry out things, for example, like they compromised the Twitter account of the Associated Press, and they sent out a fake tweet from the Associated Press, and that fake tweet was enough to knock $80 billion off the Dow index within seconds because of the way high frequency trading works. So we don't have enough time to go through all of this piece, but this was effectively, they sent out a tweet to say the White House had been attacked and Barack Obama at the time, who was president, had been injured. And that kind of rumor sent out a sentiment across algorithms, and those algorithms were trusted algorithms taken in trusted sources like the Associated Press, and they started selling shares based on this, and massive amount of money was lost as a consequence. So these are very powerful techniques. And finally, cyber warfare, the actions by a nation state or international organization to attack and attempt to damage another nation's computers or information networks. Well, guys, we've seen information warfare we've seen cyber espionage, and we're going to see a whole lot more cyber warfare in the coming weeks and months. So if you are going into a career or enhancing your career in cybersecurity and risk management, this is what you're fighting against. This is what you're preventing, this kind of stuff. So I'll now switch gears. We'll talk a little bit about COVID in the financial sector. And I like to reference Christine Lagarde because very smart lady, and this lady came out just pre-COVID, and her warning to the world was she emphasized the reality that the financial sector globally is interconnected and interdependent, and therefore an attack on one part of it may have a contagion effect. And she warned of a potential liquidity crisis from a cyber attack, and that was before COVID. You can imagine how fragile and more vulnerable systems are now, with the reality that so many people had to work from home. So many systems are now being accessed remotely. So much digitalization that happened with an accelerated state over the last 18 months, 2 years. So, I mean, there's a lot of added risks that have gone in. So it's very important that we take stock of that and be aware that it's not about an organization being okay on their own, but you're part of a sector. So if you work in the financial sector or retail or aviation, everybody has to understand that they need to take care of upstream and downstream and have that trusted piece. I refer to COVID as the most effective digital transformation officer in the world because it accelerated projects like nothing before. So with every threat, there's an opportunity, you know, and these changes bring opportunities for businesses to maybe increase their efficiency, their efficacy, increase their customer care, how they deal with clients, and so on. But all of these things depend on the magic of cyber risk management, because it's all risk if you're not managing it and managing the risks around those things from a cyber perspective. So any of these digital projects, so we often talk about the fact there's over 6 million open cybersecurity jobs out there, but there's many more millions of jobs related to this, because every business needs people, officers, stellar members of the organization that can stand up and understand cyber risk and understand how to manage a business and deal with these on a day-to-day basis. Not necessarily work in the IT security department or the cybersecurity team, but within the organization, this is an important piece of knowledge that everybody should have from that perspective. It's not the strongest of the species that survives, nor the most intelligent, but the most responsive to change. And that's very, very poignant, very relevant when it comes to COVID and those changes that have come across organizations. And we see that in every sector, in every field. It is those who are adaptable are surviving and thriving as a result of COVID, and those that didn't are suffering as a consequence. So guys, now I'm going to make it maybe a little bit more entertaining for you, because I'm going to talk about a real life cyber heist. I'm going to outline some of the examples of how this all comes together. And forgive me, I know I'm speaking really quickly, but we've a limited time. I'm passionate about the subject. I want to get as much information over to you as I can to let you know. And you can always replay this video anyway. So if I am speaking too quickly, so don't worry too much about it. So let's have a look at a real life cyber heist. Okay, so again, this reality of real world and cyber world. So in the real world, if I want to be a criminal, it's axiomatic that I need to be violent or have the propensity of threat of violence to have the kudos to enter a criminal gang or become a criminal gang. But it's different in the cyber worlds, because it's about organizing the right kind. It's almost like project management. It's about finding the right kind of resources, pulling these people together, being able to carry out a crime. You don't necessarily need to come from a criminal family. You don't necessarily need to have a legacy or pedigree of criminality to be an extremely successful cyber criminal. So now we'll uncover this. So it's Tuesday, February 2013. We're in the middle of New York City, and this guy, and all he was armed with was like a 4-inch piece of plastic, and he was on Broadway. And he walked up to an ATM, and he had a hoodie on him, and he was at 2380 Broadway. Had his plastic card, had his hoodie and his backpack on him. Went to the ATM and he withdrew money, and this is all great, all quite normal, really. And he took out $1,000, but then he kept taking out money. He took out $4,015, and then he went on a walk all around Manhattan. If anybody's been there and remembers Manhattan, 11 miles and visited 110 ATMs, and he took out over $300,000 and stuffed it in the backpack. That's the guy there, Jose Familia Reyes, with his backpack of cash. This is a real life story. You can Google this and find out more information about it if you like. And he walked around a densely populated area with lots of ATMs because he knew that was his most lucrative hunting ground to take cash out. But with military precision in 24 countries, the exact same thing was happening with crews of people. We call these money mules. These money mules were going around and withdrawing cash all over the world. 36,000 withdrawals, $40 million was taken from Bank of Muscat. And let's have a look at what exactly happened. So these guys were using prepaid debit cards. And the Bank of Muscat, no man, the payment processor had been hacked, and these cards, these codes for these cards, were sent over to local mules like these guys all around the world, and they were able to print those codes onto a piece of plastic. And they knew at what time and when was the window of opportunity to go to ATMs and start withdrawing cash from ATMs, which would eventually be drawn on the bank. The hackers had cancelled all withdrawal limits, and they had an unlimited operation. They had really no idea how much money they were going to make, but it was unlimited amount of money they could make with this kind of model and this kind of tech. These cashing crews that had imprinted the data on the cards, these were the local thugs, the local villains, if you like, that had been recruited online within forums to say, hey, do you want to make some quick cash? Here's what we need to do. We need somebody physically in Manhattan that can walk around ATMs with a card and take out the money and is willing to share the money back with us and so on. So these flash mobs, we often refer to them as. And this is the kind of hierarchy we're looking at. So you have a cyber criminal mastermind. And of course, a hacker had broken into the systems to an advanced hacker to remove the withdrawal limits and create those codes for the cards and so on. And he had the money mule manager and money mules. So let's look at these guys, because I think it's very interesting to understand on the ground level how this criminality works as well. So when we look at these defendants in this case, we have Albertico. And he was the main guy. He was the leader of those money mules. Not a sophisticated character, but the leader of these guys. And the guy we were looking at there was Jose Familia Reyes, and he was the mule that was walking around. But the money mule manager was basically the leader of this group of guys who all hung out together. And this New York crew, they were all Dominican culture and background. They were all from an area called Yonkers, which is a working class area north of Manhattan itself. They all lived within a few minutes of one road called Stratton Street. So these were just buddies that all hung around together, maybe got up to a bit of mischief, a bit of petty crime, a bit of larceny, whatever it happened to be. And now they were getting involved in multi-million operations. There was 8 of them all together. And this crew themselves took out 2,900 withdrawals, 2.4 million between 8 unsophisticated guys walking around with backpacks and a piece of plastic. There was a dry run. And I always emphasize this because the fact is that if the people who were a victim of the dry run had shared the intelligence, and that was Rack Bank, and 5 million had been taken in the December 2012 before this attack. And that's why it's so important to share intelligence and share information, because people would have been able to perhaps being prepared to deal with this and thwart this kind of an attack as well. So these are actually literal pictures from their Facebook accounts. They started posting pictures of the fake cards, the Rolexes they were buying, the Gucci, their cash, everything else like that, and they were driving around Manhattan and Yonkers with this money. So it didn't take too long before law enforcement were able to apprehend these guys. So the main guy, he basically did a runner. This guy ran back to the Dominican Republic, and he thought he'd be safe back there. And a few weeks later, he was sitting playing dominoes, actually, with a friend of his, and they were chilling out. They thought they got away with it. He obviously had a bag of cash with him because a lot of this money was never recovered. But the reality was the door was kicked open. Somebody came in and shot him dead. And I emphasize this, and I use this not for shock value, but to again bring this back to there are victims in cybercrime. It is real, and people die and people get hurt physically and so on within the world of cybercrime. They are related. But now, often people wonder, well, what happened? What was the full story here? So I'm just going to share a quick little video with you so you get an overview of actually some more details about this actual cyber heist itself.
In Brooklyn today, a Turkish man who used his computer to loot millions from cash machines was sentenced to 8 years. How did he do it? Here's Josh Elliott.
35-year-old Erşan Findikoglu is the mastermind behind one of the most intricate bank robberies in history. A crime so brazen, he posed with a pile of cash on his chest. Secret Service agent Scott Serafian says millions were taken from ATMs in New York City alone.
Block after block, ATM after ATM.
They hit them all.
They had it mapped out, and they knew that Broadway had a large number of ATMs in close proximity to each other.
From Turkey, Findikolu hacked into the computers of international banks, stole account information, and then sent ATM numbers to criminal gangs around the world he'd recruited online. He also removed all withdrawal limits from the accounts. Gang members, seen here on surveillance cameras, then went to work, hitting machines from Tokyo to London to New York, where Ken Primo is a Secret Service agent.
They came and emptied these.
Yes, multiple transactions. Put your card in, put your pins in, take out the limit, put your card in, put your pin in, take out your limit.
Back in Turkey, Findikolu was watching it all.
He was watching so that he could tell who was withdrawing how much so that he'd know how much money he was supposed to get back.
The first hit happened in February of 2011. 15,000 transactions in 18 countries. $10 million were stolen. The second hit was December 2012. 5,000 transactions in 20 countries. $5 million were withdrawn. Then the big score, February 19th, 2013. In a little over 10 hours, crews made some 36,000 transactions in 24 countries for a take of $40 million in cash. The thieves sent most of the money back to Findikolu, but started showing off their take, cash and expensive watches. Their end came at a mob movie staple, a New York diner, where police arrested one gang member carrying almost $1 million. But Dave Beach, who runs the Secret Service office in New York, says most of the money has not been recovered.
Gone. Just gone. It was cash. It's untraceable.
The operation was in fact so sophisticated that by that massive third theft, Scott, Findikolu had determined which ATMs carried the most cash of all and so instructed his crews to hit those first.
An evil genius, Josh Elliott. Thanks very much. In Brooklyn today,
So, guys, you can see that's the reality of cyber criminals, and you can see how impactful that is, and how lucrative it is for these bad guys. So now I want to talk about what we can do about it. So our most effective weapon is education, but it's education with a difference. It's educating with a degree of responsibility and loyalty and understanding about applying what you've learned to protect the organization you work for, and indeed protect yourself, your family, your business, whatever it happens to be. So I use this image of an unattended bag at an airport as a way to illustrate what we already do as human beings. If we saw something that we felt as a risk, we take responsibility for it. We put our hand and say, hey, there's something wrong. Why is that bag on its own? You know, and we would get someone to take charge or investigate what's going on because we feel threatened. We feel there's a risk of something. That's exactly what we need within organizations about cybersecurity. We need everybody to take responsibility. We need everybody to play their part. So it can't be, even as consumers, that we blame a bank if our bank account is hacked, if our phone wasn't patched and updates on it, if we had used a public Wi-Fi and with no VPN and all of those kind of things. Everybody has a community of responsibility within organizations and outside in that chain. So these two converging worlds are coming together all the time, that physical world and that cybersecurity world. That's why it's so important that we establish what I often refer to as business protection officers. Business protection officers are people that work for the business and are able to protect the business from cyber threats and cyber risks. They're not necessarily just working in a discipline of cybersecurity, cyber risk. They may be working as head of procurement. They may be head of legal. They may be the CEO, the chief risk officer, whatever it happens to be. But they can all play a substantial part and make a massive impact in protecting an organization. But the industry itself, I alluded to earlier, there's over 6 million open cybersecurity jobs. And that's what's driving the $1 million price tags on a lot of these roles that are within cybersecurity. So, for example, often people would think as the ultimate role as being a chief information security officer, and we're seeing all of these kind of roles within organizations now that $1 million, north of $1 million salaries are not rare anymore, and because it's supply and demand. But the kind of people who are getting those jobs aren't necessarily somebody that's been in the world of cybersecurity for 10, 20, 30 years. It's somebody maybe that has been in banking or aviation or retail. and they've augmented their skills with cybersecurity and risk management and those kind of areas. So they're able to serve the business better than just being an expert on one particular discipline, such as cybersecurity or cyber risk. So it's I often refer to the cybersecurity industry as a meritocracy. It's about your merits. Can you do the job? Absolutely. Then you'll get the job. It's not necessarily like other traditional career paths. So we can see this, as we say, lots of CISOs getting over $1 million. These are just some of the snapshots and screenshots I've taken off the web to show you how that's evolved. And of course, we see this now driving up onto the board itself with non-exec directors. So depending on where you are in your career, this may be part of your immediate milestone. It might be an ambition for you to gain one of these very lucrative roles and work on the good side. But I often say the answer lies within, because the knee-jerk reaction for a lot of organizations is, oh, we need to get somebody to deal with this, so let's outsource it. Is it our IT security company? Is it our accountancy firm? Who do we go to get this kind of stuff done? Well, the answers are within the organization. The people that work and love the company, that have maybe invested years of time and effort and toil into working in that company, are the ones that want to protect it most, not necessarily an external consultant that's going to come in and essentially get all of the answers from the person in there, put it into a report, and then hand it to leadership and say, hey, this is what you need to do. Well, how do you know? Because I talked to all your people. Why don't we just give the knowledge to the people in the organization? Let them learn how to do a better job, let them understand the risks, how to deal with it, and protect the organization in a much more effective way. So that is why we put together the Certified Cyber Risk Officer course, to enable business people within organizations to deal with cyber risk management, not to be afraid of the jargon and the complexities of some parts, because the course is delivered in business English, and it's delivered in a way that business people can understand this and relate it back to their own jobs and their own function and role within that. We start off within the course about understanding the cyber risk landscape itself. I'm just going to quickly talk about the 8 modules here to give you an idea of how holistic this course is. We then talk about developing cyber strategy and what requirements will be within that. And then we look at an area which is very important, because I often say you can't manage cyber risk if you don't measure it. So how do you measure it? And this isn't just about technical measurements on vulnerabilities and how secure a piece of code is or how secure a configuration is. This goes beyond that. It's how knowledgeable are our people? How effective are our policies? It's about cyber risk quantification and how does an organization do that? So it's a fascinating area as well to be involved in. We also talk about cyber risk leadership and culture. How do you establish that culture? How do you be an effective leader of cyber within an organization? And of course, there's a massive area of cyber risk in the law. It's a daunting myriad area of overlapping and often competing, conflicting regulations and compliance and local regional laws and so on. Fascinating challenge for people who are interested in that area to deal with it, to ensure, one, that they're empowering and enabling their organization to work legally in various jurisdictions around the world, because that's the thing about cyber laws. They're there to protect you, but you also have to make sure that you're actually aligned with them as well. And often found organizations that weren't aware that they may be breaching different controls, because what you do in your region may not be legal in another region when it comes to cybersecurity and the kind of controls that you have in place. Then, of course, we talk about cyber resilience, very important topic, and incident management. How does an organization effectively detect, respond, and recover from an incident? And then we look at this whole area of dealing with third parties. We've got upcoming legislation. I'm about to talk about how these overlap. Look at things like upcoming legislation, like DORA, Digital Operation Resilience Act. We have the Critical Entities Resilience Act. We have NIS, Network Information Systems Directive. All of these things are about how you deal with your third parties within an organization, and how can you trust them, and what kind of assurances do you need to get, and including from your remote workers. So we cover those areas as well.
And if I was to say to any other of my board directors or any other board directors who may listen to this, is that it should be the #1 course for all board directors as part of your professional development pathway.
I guess there were so many different aspects of it actually that I was actually genuinely surprised as to how wide the topic was. Also very interesting. Obviously, it touched areas around the outsourcing, around cyber strategy. To be honest, all these areas that we've discussed at a board level, but actually now I actually was armed and dangerous in the board meeting. So I was asking probably a lot more questions than they appreciated.
I suppose I've been in adult education for 20 years now, upskilling, doing various levels of courses. doing, I've done degrees, diplomas, kind of other maybe not non-professional qualified courses, but I have been doing in adult education for 20 years. And this is by far and away the best course I've ever done.
Having completed a master's in cybersecurity in the last couple of years, I built up a lot of theoretical knowledge, and this course was really to fill in some of the practical cyber risk management gaps that I felt I had in my knowledge. The course was really excellent, I have to say. Very practical, very relevant, very topical, with great examples, real life examples of issues that are happening today in every entity around the world. So yeah, it was a really useful course, and really thrilled that I did it, actually. Well, as I said, I've completed a cybersecurity master's, but a lot of that is theoretical, a lot of discussion points, but this course is very practical. It's really how you can implement a cyber risk management framework in your organization today. So, anyone working in that area, I would suggest, they should be looking to this course because it will help them in their day-to-day job.
So guys, that was some of the feedback from some of our students on the CCRO course. And I would love all of you to go on that journey and become a cyber leader, whether it's a CCRO or CCRS or maybe an NCSE. So to help you on your journey, and one of the things beyond providing the cybersecurity bootcamp for people and so on, for those of you who successfully completed the bootcamp, we're going to provide you with a €500 voucher towards any of the courses that you want to do. So you can contact the team and they will look after you. And if you do want to continue with your journey, this is another hand we can give you, another helping hand we can give you towards developing your career in the world of cybersecurity. So I think I did remarkably well on timing and left us plenty of time to do the Q&A session. So I'll welcome my colleague Ella and Natalia back, and we can go from there. And I think I even brought us back a few minutes, guys, didn't I?
Thank you so much, Paul. Before asking Ella to handle the questions, and we already got a couple of them on the chat, I just would like to let all of you know that this intake of the Cybersecurity Bootcamp for Women got more than 800 registrations. We are over 2,000 women trained on the Cybersecurity Bootcamp for Women. Unfortunately, not all of you could join us today, due to different time zones and work commitments. But thank you so much for the support. We know that the course has been helping many of you in the path of the cybersecurity. So thank you again. We appreciate if you can share, spread the word, and you keep it going with the Cybersecurity Bootcamp for Women. And I will follow up with you guys later. So if you want to use the voucher, I will send an email explaining how you can avail of the discount. So Ella, can you please join us? And one more thing, I encourage all of you to turn on the camera and ask your questions directly to Paul and Ella. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Natalia. And great to see Franchelle, you have your camera on. Thank you. It just makes it so much more engaging for us here at ICTTF, and then also you guys at home, because all of this is remote. So it's great to be able to see the other faces of the women doing it with you. So we have a couple of questions coming in. Again, girls, don't be shy. We've plenty of time. Keep the questions coming. The first one is from Jeanette, and I hope I've pronounced your name correctly. What are the top current barriers to attribution? Now, if there's anything, Jeanette, that you'd like to add to that question, or if you want to talk to Paul directly, please feel free, but that's our first question.
So the barriers to attribution is basically geography. I mean, it's different jurisdictions. We often find that even the most mundane cyber-related cases can take years Years, because you're talking about cooperation orders between different jurisdictions, different languages. I know within some of the course material, I look at a really simple scenario of a ruse that I call When Harry Met Sally, and the whole attack that goes on. And it's a very simple, straightforward piece, but you ended up with 7, 8 different countries involved in that one scenario. And that's the reality of it. It's very complex. Now, organizations like Interpol and Europol are making great progress in this area, with sharing and cooperation. But there's another thing that impedes this. Most law enforcement agencies around the world, of course, have limited budgets, and they have limited resources to deal with cyber-related crimes. So this isn't just, for example, a thing in Ireland or a thing in the UK or a thing in America or whatever it happens to be. And it's a commonality thing that there's limited resources, of course, to deal with these kind of issues. Now, let's say, for example, there's a murder or a rape. There's probably going to be a mobile phone and a laptop involved. So therefore, the few resources they have, and I'm not just talking about money, I'm talking about the people that can maybe carry out the forensics and so on, tend to get allocated onto the quote unquote more serious crimes than they're going to be about somebody stealing 500 euros or 1,000 euros out of somebody's bank account. That's the reality of the real world. They mightn't admit that that's what happens, but that's essentially what happens. And the other challenge that we have around attribution is the fact that salaries are so low in law enforcement and indeed military around this area. And it takes a special kind of person to stay working in law enforcement at a fraction of the salary they could get in the private sector, or military on a fraction of the salary they could get in the private sector, if they have this cyber skills. So as the salaries are going up and up and up, and I touched upon $1 million salaries there and all that kind of stuff, and somebody is on a more modest salary working in law enforcement, but they want to do the right thing. You know, these are all things that impede it and make it easier in many ways. But the primary thing is the complexity of jurisdictions.
Great. I hope, Jeanette, that answers your question. Okay, the second question we have, okay, this is a long one, so everybody listen up. Paul, in your opinion, to land a job, what kind of certifications are better? Cloud, pen testing, ethical hacking, project management, risks, any suggested path? And Gabrielle is saying that she knows all of them are intended for different purposes, and she knows it depends on what way you want to drive your career.
Well, that's the answer. I'm not being smart, but that's really the answer. I mean, it's the qualifications you're going to go for. If you want to work in the technical side of things, then you want to get technical qualifications. So if you want to play around with and you're motivated and your passion is around configuring firewalls and doing malware analysis and all of those kind of things, and they're the qualifications to support that path. If you are naturally an organizer and you're great at project management and your career has been in project management and it's something that still floats your boat and you're passionate about it, then something like the CCRO would be fantastic, or the CCRS, or even the NCSC, from the point of view of being able to understand how to implement and operationalize the NIST cybersecurity framework within an organization. So you're sort of on that path, on that side. And then there's another stream of qualifications, things like the CISSP, the CISM. And they tend to be for people that want to go in and manage a cybersecurity program or operationally within an organization. So they're quite different kind of streams. So my short, salient, poignant answer on the piece is you want to get the qualifications that are linked to the role that you're after. One good way of doing this, and I think it was, I could be wrong, but it might have been Shaq yesterday in the call that explained what one of the things that she did was she would look at profiles of people in those job roles and see what qualifications they had. And then she would try and get those qualifications. So these are good ideas, you know? So it makes common sense. I think everyone understands that it is about making yourself look like what they're going to want. And if they want somebody that has project management, framework experience, you know, all those kind of things, they're the qualifications you want. If you want an all-rounder and someone that has business skills but is able to maybe lead up a cyber risk management program, a cybersecurity program, CCRO, CCRS, and so on. Operationalize and work on it from within a cybersecurity department, CISSP, CISM. Now, things like CISP and CISM, they're fantastic qualifications, okay? But they've become basically a just a checkbox in order to be able to go for a lot of cybersecurity jobs. And I've had a lot of deep discussions with some of the biggest recruitment companies in the world about this, because this is creating an issue, because a lot of times it's not a CISP that's required for a particular role. But what happens in the world is somebody decides they need to get somebody on their team, and that they've got a sign off to get a full time, and they go to the HR department. The HR department goes, "Well, I don't know anything about cybersecurity. What qualifications would this person have?" And they go, "Well, I suppose they should have a CISP or CISM, but actually they mightn't be relevant for the role." So, for example, if somebody was going in to implement ISO 27001 in an organization, ISMS framework, information security framework, and they might have qualifications as an implementer, a lead auditor, and everything, but their CV won't even go forward for that job because they don't have this broader qualification around cybersecurity. So you really need to focus on where you're going and what you're after. And as I say, the little caveat is, there are qualifications that tend to get you past the first door, but won't necessarily get you the job. But thankfully, that's changing quite a bit, because, for example, it was Hayes IT Recruitment. I did a massive global webinar with them about recruitment a couple of months ago, and we talked about this openly. And they're working with clients and organizations so that they can better understand the kind of people we need. Because I used to say, until we have people with purple mohawks in the boardroom dealing around cyber, well, then we're not going to deal with cyber properly. And by that I mean is we need diversity. You know, we need all different kinds of people working with around cyber risk. It can't just be one kind of type of person or somebody who's just good at technical stuff. We need all different kinds, and it's a holistic area. So the path is as wide as you want, and you can just focus and go after the piece you want as well. So hopefully that's helpful. Next question, please, Ella.
Next question is, it's actually a good follow-on question, because it's, what is the duration for the completion for each of the 3 types of certifications suggested? So, for example, CCRS, CCRO, and the qualification requirement to enroll for each.
We can basically, we'll send that information. It's all up on the website, but rather than eat into our time here on that, all that information will be sent out, and Natalia has the everybody's details, so we'll be reaching out to you with those information and the voucher. But what I will say to you is this, just to understand the hierarchy of these things, right? CCRO, Certified Cyber Risk Officer, is the holy grail of qualifications. It is the qualification being used by non-exec directors and board members and those reporting into boards around the world, especially within the financial sector. Okay, now for those that were unable to dedicate the time and effort to get a CCRO, is why we created this CCRS. It is effectively the same syllabus, but delivered in a completely different way. So you can actually fast track your way to getting a lot of the knowledge, and maybe choose later on to go and do the assignments and the exam to get the CCRO. And then we have the NCSE, and the NCSE, we have a number of different variants of that as well, where you can fast track a boot camp that we have coming up as well, and you're able to get qualified quite quickly. So because I love this idea of it being a meritocracy and people getting qualified quickly and get through, if you're putting in the effort and you've got the time, we have the mechanism to get you qualified with the knowledge very, very quickly. So, for example, with the NCC. So I would encourage you, rather than me just waffle off a load of different times for each of them, like, 8 weeks for CCRO and yada, 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 through the whole piece. Engage with us. Have a conversation with Natalia and the team and Ellen and so on, and find out where your first step is or where your fit is, because we're not a hard sales organization trying to sell. Everything we're doing is a not-for-profit initiative, so we're just trying to help people within the industry as well. So we won't suggest something for you that isn't right for you. The other part of that question, Ella, was around the what sort of credentials do they need in order to be able to go for the course. Well, we don't have a set criteria, but we do review people's profile and their objectives in doing a course before we essentially go, yeah, that's okay. This is the right course for you, because we're not just trying to get people to click and sign up and do courses. We want to make sure that you're going, and that's why we're so successful at this as well. And what was just such great feedback and such a great community of people, putting testimonials together about the course and so on, because we're making sure it's the right fit for you. And then we support you through your journey and get you qualified and get you certified so that you can go on to that next part of your journey. So my strong advice is engage with us, have a conversation, find out what's best fit for you. And if we don't have the right relevant step for you, we'll tell you that maybe you should go here or maybe you should go there, because it's where your career needs to go. So that's the best advice I can give on that. Next question, please, Ella.
Thanks, Paul. Next question is an interesting one, actually. What do I do next if I want to get into presenting? Does ICTTF provide training in that area? They obviously think you're a good presenter, Paul.
Would you stop? I'll get all embarrassed now. We can recommend a trainer in presenting. There's an organization that we've used to help train some of our people as well, and we can highly recommend them. So if you send a direct message to Natalia, we'll be happy to pass on their details to you. An expert training company that specializes in presentation training. We don't do that. But
sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah.
Just clarifying, it's pen testing. So
pen testing. I thought it said
yes,
presenting.
Exactly. Yeah, no, it's pen testing.
Oh, sorry. I heard presenting. Sorry. Thanks for that.
My bad there.
Yeah. Okay. So the pen testing, penetration testing. Okay. We don't offer courses in pen testing, and the reason we don't is because there are so many other companies out there that train in the technical area of cybersecurity. So it's a crowded market. There's lots of different options. And it might be something you're very interested in, and everything from, and I'm not recommending anything, from Cyber all the way up to the Palo Altos and solution providers like Cisco and so on, will all have particular courses that you can do, and all have various pros and cons to them. But be careful if this is what you think your career path is, because pen testing, and I'm an ethical hacker and I trained as a pen tester and so on. The services are generally delivered at a very low cost, unless you're at the very top end of that game. So what you might find is that you love what you're doing, but you end in a quite modestly paid role, because you're competing with effectively a service that can be delivered remotely from anywhere in the world. So therefore, you're not competing with somebody. If you're living in the UK, you're not competing with the cost of living in the UK or Ireland or whatever. You're competing with much lower salaries in other regions and other countries that deliver those kind of services. But I would. I understand the difference between pen testing and vulnerability scanning and all of those things before you go down that road. I just say proceed with caution, because it sounds a fascinating area and it sounds great. But at the end of the day, depending on your career path and your aspirations about the kind of living you want and the kind of career you want, it might not be for you. Again, depending on where you live as well.
Thanks, Paul. We're getting close on time. We've 2 more questions here, and hopefully we can get through both of them. If we run over, if anyone needs to drop off, just feel free to. But they're 2 good questions, so hopefully we can squeeze them in. So from Claire, any recommendations for practical incident response training courses? Interested in evidence protection, forensic analysis, etc.
Okay, so for somebody who wants to go deep dive into forensics is a lot different. Say, for example, we're talking about evidence protection and so on, and chain of custody and so on. But the general principles of that are covered off in, for example, the incident response parts of our NCSE course. So I would say the vast majority of organizations, I think the statistics shows over 90% are using the cybersecurity framework from NIST in order to be able to develop their incident response capabilities, develop playbooks and so on that. So if it's incident response, I would point them towards the NIST cybersecurity framework. If it's forensics, I would, and they want to get in that area, they should be looking at organizations maybe like Guidance Software, Encase, those kind of tools. Again, that's a very, very much a cottage industry, and very, very much a very specific niche industry, and a particular kind of personality and person gets involved in forensics itself. But incident response, there's a huge demand for people that understand instant response. And because instant response just isn't about the technical piece, it's about personality. It's about the softer skills, being able to convey confidence and information and distill and stay with control and be able to deal with these sort of dynamic situations as well. So if you've got that kind of personality, you might find, wow, I'm a brilliant instant responder. So there's lots of different levels of that within instant response, the technical piece all the way up to almost project management piece and crisis management.
Okay, we have a minute left and one more question.
Cool. Go for it.
I'm interested in GRC, governance, risk management, compliance, for anyone who doesn't know, and currently work in compliance. Would you suggest CISA or CISM?
CCRO is what I would recommend. There you go. So I get that in within 1 minute, because I tell you why. GRC, governance, risk and compliance. When I wrote this CCRO course, it was from the perspective of governance, risk and compliance. And because it was written for business leaders to understand how to, my first book was The Art of Cyber Risk Oversight. My second book is about cyber risk leadership. It is one of the strengths that we have within the CISRO course. It's about establishing GRC from a cyber perspective. So that theme oozes throughout all 8 modules within the CISRO course. So it's a really good way to do it. I have a CISM, I have a CISSP, so all those qualifications as well. So I know exactly what's involved in them. And from a GRC perspective, and it's not a competition, but certainly if I was in the market, I would be looking at something like the CCRS, the CCRO, something like that. To be brutally honest on it. So hopefully I got that in within a minute, Ella.
Yeah, you did. And we're exactly 5 o'clock. So if there's anyone left that can stay an extra minute and has a question, feel free to ask. Otherwise, I'll hand back to Natalia. We're just on time.
Thank you so much, Ella. Thank you, Paul. I've sent on the chat the email. You guys can ask us any questions you have after the course. It's info@icttf.org. As I mentioned, I will follow up with the details about the other courses, how to use the voucher. But as Paul said, it's not only like a sales pitch or whatever. We don't want to go hard on this. We want you to interact with the community, to be part of the cybersecurity industry. So feel free to reach us on LinkedIn, on the community itself, and any questions you have about the subject, feel free to send to us. And I hope to see you all very soon on the community interacting with us. Thank you so much, and have all a lovely evening, morning. I don't know where you are, so thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody. Cheers, guys. Thanks a lot. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.